A new Forum research poll shows John Tory opening up a big lead on Chow and on Rob Ford, especially among female voters. Now, to be fair, Forum polls have not always been the most accurate surveys in previous elections that we've covered here on Battleground, but these new numbers are at least consistent with trends we've been seeing in the campaign so far, namely that Tory seems to be moving up and Rob Ford's support is holding steady. For more analysis now on what these numbers might mean, let's bring in Newstalk 1010's Mark Toohey, who joins us on Fridays to talk about Battle for Toronto. And Mark, first off, I want to get your sense of what struck you the most out of all these numbers.
Well, I think what's interesting is that the consistency now of John Tory's numbers has impressed me. I mean, the first poll came out, could be an outlier. The second poll came out, could be an outlier. The sample sizes, you don't really know what to make of that in detail. This is the third one, and all of the polls have their weaknesses and their strengths. Yeah. But I think what we're seeing now is some credible evidence that John Tory is a contender. Because as much as people assumed that the name would get him into contention, the numbers weren't there. And I think that really was hurting his campaign, because I think, as we talked last time, the biggest thing for John Tory to win is for people to think that he can. And I think these numbers start to show that he has he has a possibility of winning. So the people who are in the anybody but Olivia Chow camp now have another place to go that might be more palatable than Rob Ford.
And I was going to ask you about that, the so-called anybody but Chow, anybody but Ford camps. It's really been a sort of one of the themes throughout this election. These new numbers, I guess, would suggest that Tory is becoming the anyone but Ford, as well as perhaps the anyone but Chow.
Yeah, it's sort of. It's interesting because conventional strategy, you wouldn't assume that you can win up the middle. I mean, that used to be the path where you could get the most voters from both sides and be the mediocre sort of blancmange candidate that Canadians would love. I don't think that works anymore in Canadian politics typically, but maybe he
Rob
can
Ford's
do that.
2010 win, a case in point.
People want somebody with an opinion, and they really, the election's going to come down to trust. Who do you trust? And if you look the candidate in the eyes and you believe that they believe what they're saying, even if you don't agree with it, they get points. And candidates that come across as too polished, too slick, too messaged up, they suffer.
Yeah. One of the interesting numbers here as well is Rob Ford's numbers. You know, despite the scandals, despite the baggage, Rob Ford always holds steady in these polls. And you worked for Rob Ford's campaign back a couple years ago now. And so I want to get your sense. I mean, what are you seeing in Rob Ford's numbers holding steady as they are? What do you make of that?
Well, he's got a core constituency that's never going to leave him. They just love him. And that's in part because he's contacted hundreds of thousands of people in this city, and they believe, at least in their minds, that they have a personal relationship with him. He's family. Doesn't matter what mistakes he's made, they're not going to turn their back on family. So that's a core base, but I don't think it's more than maybe 8%. What surprises me, frankly, is that his hard base numbers in the sort of the mid-20s hasn't changed much. And I'm surprised by that. I thought it would be lower. But I think what they're seeing there is two things. We're seeing a sort of a higher income anybody but Chow candidate, which is available for John Tory if he shows a possibility of winning. And then you also just sort of see people who really, they don't interact in a political way with the world the way that you and I do. They look at their tax bill. It hasn't gone up very much. They look at the services they're getting in the city. They're as good as they were before. The life that they get, the interaction they have with the city is the services, and the services haven't gone down, and the prices haven't gone up. So they're happy. And if that was to continue, no matter what kind of shenanigans happen at City Hall, I think there's a large percentage of people out there who remain available for Ford.
I want to play now a clip from John Tory from earlier today talking about the poll numbers the way politicians do, not referencing them at all. Let's watch the clip and then we'll come back to that.
Look, we had other front runners for months at a time during the initial stage of this campaign, and I wasn't worried by that. I mean, again, this is a snapshot of public opinion. I'm going to campaign just as hard from today forward and talk about Smart Track. There's still lots of people who don't know about the trains every 15 minutes within 7 years and across the city, connecting people to jobs, and I'm going to go out and spread that message right here this afternoon and for every one of the, I think it's 80 days that are left. So I'm not letting up at all, and we'll carry on that basis.
And Mark, of course, that is the quintessential political answer to a poll. I asked Olivia Chow what she makes of the new numbers. What numbers, right? Don't reference them at all. I'm going to keep working just as hard as if they're not there. How does a campaign, when you're looking at these numbers, and let's say you're John Tory and you're looking at these poll numbers, the last 3 polls of a few months, Well, as a front runner, what must the campaign be thinking now?
Well, I think if I was them, and I haven't talked to them in a little while, my guess is they're feeling pretty happy. I think they now have a strategy. They kind of know where they're going. And so I think that these numbers just support the fact that they're on the right track. You're right. He did the traditional political answer. It was a non-answer, but it's even more important for him now to not answer that, that he's ahead, because then it gives credibility when he's behind.
Yeah.
And then he pivoted right to what he thinks is his core message, which is Smart Track, and they just keep pushing that as a brand.
Yeah. And if you're Chow's campaign, looking at these numbers, and you're slipping, you're seeing even you're now statistically tied with Ford, you're losing with women, and we're going to talk to Ginny Movac a little bit about that later. But if you're Olivia Chow's campaign and you look at these numbers, publicly you won't acknowledge them, you say the only poll that matters is election day, but internally, what do you think Chow's camp has to do here to shake things up?
I think they have to reset their strategy. They've got a very good campaign team, and I'm sure that they'll be able to figure out how they have to adjust. At the beginning of the campaign, she was going for the anyone but Rob Ford vote. She's no longer the clear lock on that, so she now has to differentiate from Tory. But she spent a lot of time talking with you, Bryn, about Rob Ford, raised your taxes, the plan that he has for transit is going to cost money. Nobody is hearing that.
Yeah.
She should just stop talking about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's true or not, frankly. Rob Ford talks about nothing except saving you money.
Yeah.
Nothing except cutting your taxes.
Yeah.
Nothing except being responsible with your money. You cannot beat him on that message.
Yeah.
Find another way around.
Perfect. Mark Toohey, thanks very much as always for the chat.
Good to be here.
And as we were just talking about with Mark, one of the more interesting findings in these new numbers is that the female vote seems now to be drifting over to John Tory, who grabbed 38% of the female vote in this survey compared to just 23% for Olivia Chow. Now, if you go back 1 month to another Forum poll done in early July, those numbers were basically reversed. Here to talk about the female vote and why it may be coalescing around John Tory, we're joined by political strategist Ginny Movac. Ginny, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks.
I want to get your sense about the female vote numbers in this poll, because it is startling. In just over a month, literally a month and 3 days, Olivia Chow has gone from 38% support amongst female voters to 23% support, and John Tory has done the opposite. He's gone from 24% early in the summer, now he's up to 38%. Do you have any theory as to why this shift may have happened?
Well, I think the John Tory campaign's been very smart. They knew early on that one of his biggest problems was that he was not relatable. He was considered a part of the elite, part of the business class, very downtown. But people who knew him and people who've worked on campaigns with him and known him personally know that he's a family man. He has got kids, he's got a ton of grandchildren, and that's a big part of his life. His wife has always been very involved in his political decisions, and I think the campaign made a really smart decision to highlight that. And both using traditional media and social media, if you follow him on Twitter, there's a picture of him with one of his grandchildren pretty much every day, like eating an ice cream cone or what have you. And I think, as superficial as that sounds, I think that really matters to people. They want someone they can relate to. And I was listening to Ms. Chow on your program earlier, and she talks about things that I think people don't relate to. And she talks about the importance of family, but she doesn't do it in real terms that people can understand.
And I think what's interesting for me, I covered U.S. politics for several years, and you can see there is voting by gender. Women from both parties say if Hillary runs, they want to vote for Hillary. And I also maybe get the sense that in this municipal election, it's not about gender. It's about tax bills. It's about picking up garbage. It's about filling potholes. So am I wrong, even, Ginny, to look at this as a gender breakdown and think that somehow Olivia has lost support of women?
Yeah, I think the gender breakdown can be overstated. I mean, Rob Ford didn't become mayor last time because of women voting for him. He won because of his message, and is talking about the gravy train. So it can be overstated, and I think it is. The media coverage is focusing on this gender issue, and it's certainly one aspect. But if you look at the broader issues that your earlier guest was talking about, things like the fact that she ran on an anyone but Ford campaign early on, people just care about taxes. They care about transit. I think something like 60% of respondents told the pollsters that their number one issue is transit. Well, Olivia Chow is telling people they should take the bus more, but to a mother, to anyone, frankly, that's not really plausible. They're much more likely to want a concrete plan that's not going to raise their taxes to actually get them across the city faster, especially if they're carrying, their kid's baby stroller,
Yeah.
So the gender factor plays a part, certainly, but at the end of the day, we're all taxpayers.
And I wonder too, Ginny, and you might have some insight on this, for politicians to pander to the so-called man vote or female vote, does that ever work as a strategy? Or if the women vote is going to John Tory, it's just happened because of his campaign and he can't really do anything to keep them, they may go elsewhere. You know, in a sense, is it wrong to pander for a vote based on gender?
I think it would be a mistake for Chow at this point. I think Mark Truey's right. I think she can make some changes that could benefit her because election day is a long way off. But I think it would be wrong for her at this point to completely change her campaign in order to try to win female votes. I think what she has to do is focus on the people as taxpayers and focus on being human and showing them what she has to offer. And I think it's correct that she's not going to win on the gravy train argument. She's not going to win if she sells herself as a fiscal conservative. So she has to give them something other than, you know, 10% more buses, something substantive that tell people, including women, what she has to offer, or this trend will continue and she will suffer.
Okay, Ginny Movac, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.